Hey guys, this is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our Week 7 DraftKings NFL wide receiver picks. There's quite a few wide receivers that are in play this week, and a lot of them happen to be in the lower end of the price spectrum. There's a few guys up top that I am willing to pay for as well. So let's call up the PowerPoint slides and let's get into it. The four guys who I want to highlight today are DeAndre Hopkins, Larry Fitzgerald, Dante Moncrief, and Stephon Diggs. The first guy we're going to talk about is DeAndre Hopkins. He's been an absolute stud so far to start the season. He's seen double-digit targets in every game so far, averaging almost 15 targets per game through the first 6. He's coming up with 9 catches, 120 yards as his averages, and has 5 touchdowns in the first 6 games already. This is a guy that gets red zone looks almost every game. He's somebody who's getting short passes. They're looking for him down the field. I mean, he is just all over the place, a huge part of that Houston offense. Houston is an underdog in this game as well, with 2 teams that have a top 6 pace so far in the league. Both of these teams run a lot of plays per second, and we should see an outsized game for basically both of these offenses here. With Hopkins being such a large part of that offense, you got to think that he's going to see his share of looks and his share of yards. Next guy I want to talk about is Larry Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald goes up against Baltimore, who is allowing the second most fantasy points to wide receivers and also the second most fantasy points to quarterbacks. So you know that there's going to be a lot of passing in this game, and Fitzgerald should be the guy who sees a big bulk of it. Arizona is expected to put up 28 points in this one, so there's going to be a couple touchdowns scored. Fitzgerald's a guy who's averaging 7 catches, 97 yards, and a touchdown per game. Those are some pretty sick numbers. If he gets over 100 with the same average 7 catches that he has, that's 20 points right there, and averaging a touchdown per game would bring him up to 26, which would be excellent value for a guy who's 7,400. He is the 15th most targeted wide receiver with 9 targets per game. Now, that is a few less than some of the guys who are studs that are a little bit above him, but he is getting a touchdown per game, which is an insane stat. He does see a lot of looks, especially in the red zone, and even though there are a lot of other wide receivers on that Cardinals team, guys like John Brown and Michael Floyd, who also make pretty good plays this weekend, Fitzgerald is the big stud. He's the guy who gets fed, and he is the guy who I think will have a really nice, solid game against Baltimore. He's got the lowest floor of those 3 guys, and he probably also has the highest ceiling, although Brown could catch some long touchdown passes. But I do like Fitzgerald's ceiling as well, so that's why I put him in, included him. If you want to use any or all of the Arizona Cardinals wide receivers this weekend, though, Baltimore secondary has been that bad that you get no arguments from me. Now, we're going to have to save a little bit of money at some point if we're going to try to fit in, some of the big guys who we're going to talk about at wide receiver and running back today. One of the guys that I really like to be able to do that is Dante Moncrief. He's on the team that's favored in the highest total game. If you guys saw my quarterback video, you know that I do like Andrew Luck this week. I think that's going to be a shootout between Luck and Drew Brees. So I was looking for wide receivers in that game. I don't hate the guys on the other side either. Guys like Willie Snead, maybe even a Brandon Cooks from the Saints. And I also don't hate his teammate T.Y. Hilton, but for the price and for what I think he's going to be able to do, I think Dante Moncrief is the one wide receiver I really want out of this Indianapolis and New Orleans game. The Saints have allowed the 3rd most points to fantasy quarterbacks, so we're going to see a lot of throws from Luck. The thing I like about Moncrief over Hilton is basically a guy who's a deep threat. He's running a lot of the long routes. He's the one who's stretching the defense. Moncrief is the guy who runs the entire route tree. He gets targeted a little more often because he's running those quick slants. So on 3rd down, he's a guy that can make that play. He's running those ins, he's running those outs, he's making plays on the sideline, he's making plays over the middle, and he also has the speed and the ability to go long. He's also a guy that they can throw a quick screen to, let him pick up some runs. He's not bad after the catch. He has at least 6 catches in 4 of his 6 games this year. And he had 6 catches last game with Andrew Luck and 6 and 7 catches in the first 2 games of the season when Luck was there. So he does actually do a lot better with Andrew Luck in there as his quarterback, which is obviously going to be the case this weekend. With a good situation, high-scoring game, I definitely think that Moncrief's a guy who could put up a decent number and pay off that $5,200 salary. Now, the cheap guy who I've been looking at is going to be Stephon Diggs. He is definitely the best wide receiver on the Vikings right now and is basically their wide receiver 1. In the last 2 weeks, he's caught 13 of the 19 passes he has seen thrown his way for an average of 9.5 targets and 6.5 catches per game. He's averaging 18.8 fantasy points in these 2 games that he finally has started playing and getting some time on the field. Detroit allows the 9th most points to wide receivers, and Stephon Diggs is basically as cheap as you're going to find a wide receiver 1 this week. Last week, for the same price, we were able to get Anquan Boldin in a pretty solid matchup, and he paid off pretty well. At this price, if we can get 16.5 points out of Diggs, maybe 7 or 8 catches for 80 or 90 yards, or if he catches 5 catches for 50 yards and a touchdown, he's going to more than pay off the salary for you and make him one of the guys that you really want to have on your roster. So that pretty much sums it up for some of the wide receivers that we're looking at. As I said, there are a couple other guys that we really like. Some of those wide receivers for Arizona, some of the other wide receivers in that Indianapolis and New Orleans game, all those guys are going to be in play. They're all in good spots going up against bad defenses. Even if you want to look over at the Steelers wide receivers, it's tough for me to pay up for Antonio Brown, but I do like the fact that Landry Jones is in there a little bit more. I really like Martavius Bryant, but I think he's going to be really highly owned off that big 2-touchdown game he had last time. But again, these are all some other guys that you can consider and look at this week. Like I said, there's a lot of options at wide receiver, a lot of ways that you can go. You can pay up, you can pay down. There's a lot of guys in that $5,000 range that make a little bit of sense, have a little bit of talent as well. So it's a week where there's a lot of options. I do think it's tough to fade guys like DeAndre Hopkins as well as he's been playing. I do think you need some exposure to at least one Arizona Cardinal pass catcher. Like I said, I'm a fan of Fitzgerald, and I'll be paying up for him, but I'm not going to argue with anybody who goes Brown or Floyd either. Those guys all seem to be in good spots this week. So that sums it up for our wide receiver plays for DraftKings for Week 7. Thanks for joining us here at RotoCurve, and as always, stay classy, DFS.